Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode with the Crime and Coffee Couple. My name's Allison.
And my name's Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Hey, Al. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
All right. What you laughing about?
Once again, we are starting this podcast, and our dog is licking her behind quarters.
Yeah, I swear she doesn't do this all day around everything else. But if you're watching on the video on Spotify or YouTube, she's going to town on herself.
She's nose deep up in that chutch.
And you know why? My favorite joke about that is, you know why dogs lick themselves?
Because they can.
Right.
So in other news, I am officially wearing reading glasses.
Oh, yeah. Are you active right now?
Yes, right now. Welcome to 45.
Yeah, and why don't you tell our viewers how many different pairs you've bought so far?
Well, you know, one just never knows which type to get in terms of strength. So one sometimes has to experiment with different strengths. So I purchased 3 different strengths.
And how many total glasses does that include?
9.
9 pairs of glasses in all of those. So luckily, Amazon will just send you anything. You order it and it's in your mailbox the next day.
Well, because they were groupings of 3 and they were only $8 a pop. So, okay, fine. I wasted $16. Shame on me. I can donate them. Maybe somebody else could use them.
You could return them.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Because that
who's doing that?
That requires you to go somewhere and like return them, talk to a human being.
I don't
QR
do that.
code. Yeah, that's not up your alley.
No.
That's all right. Yeah, that's so you're officially older with I think people call them cheaters.
Cheaters, readers.
Readers, whatever.
Yeah, whatever you want to call them. They're on my face.
Do these work now? These officially?
Oh, yeah. When I'm looking up at the camera, it's very blurry, but that's all right.
So you're not going to be looking that much. That's all right.
No, I'll still be looking, but it helps me see my computer much better.
That's good. That's good. While we're sitting here, you know, I always like to enjoy some kind of coffee. We're the Crime and Coffee Couple. We like to view it as like sitting around a coffee table with some of your friends. Like we're just real. Like we're just kind of say what we're thinking usually most of the time.
Chatting with our friends.
Yeah. You guys are our friends and we appreciate you being here. So like the reason I bring that up, next to me, I've got this thing I bought for Allison called the Ember mug, which you guys probably have. This isn't a paid advertisement. We usually talk about stuff that will improve your lives because it improved ours.
It was probably one of my favorite Christmas presents.
Yeah, which I'm happy to hear that. But so this thing is like a charged mug, so it keeps any drink like hot for like what, an hour or 2 hours, something like that.
It says up to 80 minutes. I will tell you, I like my coffee very hot.
Hot.
Yeah, very hot. So that's why mine doesn't last quite that long. I would probably guess mine would last about an hour. But if you like your drinks really hot and you find that you're constantly putting them back in the microwave, for me, I wasn't doing that. I was putting mine in a travel mug, regardless if it was a Saturday morning and I was just staying home. And I don't know, something about that just... I didn't like it because it made me feel less cozy and at home. Is
it the sensory thing? Like for me, I know I like to drink out of a regular mug. Sometimes I'll take like a ceramic mug to like the bus stop or something. Like if I'm dropping the kids off or whatever, it's like I just like to drink out of a regular ceramic mug. I don't like to drink out of a metal one.
Yeah, for me, it's not sensory at all, but it just felt less cozy to me. And I'm all about the coziness.
Yeah, absolutely. And this thing is hot as HE double hockey sticks. I will say that. Like I've got a little baby tongue, so I got to put the temperature down a little bit. But if you love hot coffee, I would highly suggest getting yourself one of these Ember mugs. And we'll put a link to actually probably the Cheaters and the Ember mug in our show notes. And a little secret, if you want to support us and you don't really want to become a Patreon or, you know, it's a little out of your price range, if you go to our Amazon link in the show notes, just buy anything on Amazon, anything, we get like a commission. So just just keep that between us. So well, you check it out.
But it comes with a base that charges it. So if you're sitting near the base and you just have your mug resting on it, you don't have to worry about the battery running out. So I have 2 bases, one in the family room and then one by my desk where I do my research.
Yeah, it seems like reviews are either like, it doesn't hold it long enough, or like, why not just use your Yeti mug? Or it's like, I love it. It's the best thing ever. You seem to be in the best thing ever camp.
Right, because your last sip is just as hot as your first sip.
And I don't love hot stuff, so I don't use it a lot until this. So it was good.
It's amazing.
Yeah, speaking of coffee, so Allison's crazy, as you guys know.
She's psycho.
Yeah. And she's always thinking about different things, like how to improve the house. Like, not good things, like fantastic things that are very much appreciated and useful.
We'd be living in squalor if I did not live in this house.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Or like the best thing we would have is like a nice card table. Oh, and a lazy boy, like a really nice lazy boy recliner.
There'd be a lazy boy and a card table and a TV, a good TV for sure.
Yeah.
Other than that,
that's about it.
No decorations.
White walls
would be sterile and white.
Yeah.
Yeah.
because they would work. It would be fine. But
Yeah, it'd be functional.
yeah, tell them about the dream you had.
So Mike keeps mentioning that he wants to get an espresso maker, cappuccino maker, that sort of thing. So his birthday is in April, so he started doing research and he decided that the Ninja Cafe
Ninja Lux Cafe, I believe.
Okay, so that was the thing he had researched and thought for the money, it's the best you can get. So I was thinking in my head, okay, where can I put it? Where will it be functional? I like the idea of a coffee bar. We have a little coffee bar in our kitchen. So in my dream, I actually designed a coffee bar. And it's at this like white banquette type of, I don't know.
Banquette? Like, what is,
maybe I just
that
made that up. Who the heck knows?
What are they like? What are some of those
A
words?
buffet?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. It's this
Put
white.
it by the Chesterfield.
The Chesterfield,
I
the
don't know.
Davenport.
Yeah.
I don't friggin' know. But I was thinking we would make our coffee bar over there. And it didn't really come to me again until you mentioned it this morning. And I was like, oh my gosh, my dream. So once we do get that for your birthday, I'm going to make that our new coffee bar. And then I'll post a picture of the thing that came to me in my dreams.
Yeah, if you guys have any suggestions for like good coffee espresso makers, like we have the Nespresso and that's really good. But you know, I kind of geek out on some coffee stuff. Like I'm looking to get a pour over thing. I've already got the French press, which I used today. I probably had 5 or 6 cups of coffee today. But if there's any suggestions out there, like I looked into the Ninja Lux and like, you know, espresso machines are usually like $2,000 or something.
Yeah.
Like I'm not touching a $2,000 like machine. That's just not worth it to me. But this one, like this Ninja one is like $400, which is still super expensive.
That's a lot for sure.
So
But if you're looking at one of those machines, it is a lot cheaper.
Yeah, because it's a grinder too, like a nice, like, you know, exact grinder, and all this has I think a scale on it and stuff. Maybe, I don't know. Don't quote me
You're
on that.
making things up right now.
I might be.
But we're one of those people that just coffee is one of our greatest loves of life.
Oh, yeah.
So to me, you know, if you're going to enjoy the hell out of it,
Yeah.
you got to fork over a little bit of cash.
I agree, especially if it's for me.
Yeah. So on that note, are you ready to get started?
I am.
All right. So this is the case of the Nutty Putty Cave and the tragic death of John Edward Jones. So amateur and professional cavers alike flock to explore the narrow passages of the Nutty Putty Cave. And this is located in Utah, not far from Salt Lake City, from what I understood. So the cave was first discovered in 1960, and it once averaged 5,000 annual visitors. And it was really a favorite spot for a lot of local Boy Scout groups and, you know, just people that were looking out to get into the great outdoors, explore the beauty of Utah. This included a lot of college students.
Well, with the name like Nutty Putty, it probably attracts a lot of people.
Right. People get curious about it. So the location earned its name because the walls of the cave, oozed a thick clay-like substance that kind of resembled the texture of what you would expect with silly putty. So that is how it got its name. So under the entrance of the cave snakes 1,400 feet of limestone tunnels and chutes that were formed from the ground up by hot rising water from hydrothermal activity. So caving, which depending on where you live in the world, you might know it as spelunking or potholing, is the exploration of cave systems. And we've done caving once before in Florida, and it is not for me.
It's pretty awesome. I thought it was fantastic. I don't want to get in those really small spaces, but what we were doing in Florida here, which I didn't even know we had caves, but it was pretty fun.
There was one particular area where I started to get a little panicky just because I thought in my head, what if I don't get out of this situation? And then when our son introduced me to this case, I actually started crying once I learned the details of it because it's just that horrifying.
And sorry, but I have to tell a really fast story about our caving adventure. We went through a cave and we were like going pretty deep, and like there was different holes to come out of and whatever. And you'll probably remember this, but you know, you can go out this hole or this hole, and I was like, I'm going to try to see if I can get to this one. I start climbing up, and I get my head out, and one of our friends, female, is actively peeing like right in front of me, and I was like, whoa, hey, how you doing?
She and I both went at the same time, and the area we chose that particular area because no one was there and it was like hidden.
Yeah.
We didn't expect your head to pop out of the earth like a groundhog.
Yeah, and like, you know, some people might make her feel better, be like, I didn't see anything, and I said to her husband and like both her and her husband, I was like, oh, I saw everything. I saw the whole enchilada, like that.
Literally,
the enchilada
whole taco
was right in my face. So yeah, that's my little story.
So because the Nutty Putty Cave attracted experienced cavers as well as curious tourists alike who traveled from far and wide to explore the treacherous passageways of the cave, amateur explorers would sometimes find themselves in dangerous situations. So, the Nutty Putty Cave, from what I understood, was kind of user friendly because there would be less treacherous areas. You could choose, which way you go. There were a lot of open caverns, more open type areas, or you could choose to go into a more difficult location. So that's why it would bring all sorts of different people to the area. So oftentimes people would get themselves into trouble. And at the start of the millennium, a total of 6 visitors found themselves stuck within the passageways of the Nutty Putty Cave. But thankfully, in these cases, these individuals were able to be successfully rescued. They have the whole Utah team that's in place. And these are volunteer rescuers that have their pagers or cell phones or whatever on hand, and they get contacted when somebody's in a situation like this. So because the local sheriff's office and rescue teams were kind of growing weary of conducting these large rescue operations, and on top of it, really more so, they were fearful that one day it could result in somebody not being successfully rescued and then maybe would be proved to be fatal. They made the decision to close the cave off from the public, and this happened in 2006. However, due to an intervention from the Tempangos Grotto, and this is a society that's dedicated to the conservation of caves, the Nutty Putty Cave ended up being reopened to the public in May of 2009. So it was closed somewhere around 3 years. So with its reopening, though, the grotto created an online booking system that limited only one group of explorers in the cave at a time. So it was way more controlled. It wasn't just a free-for-all of come and go. It was, you had to book it. So at night, the entrance to the cave was actually padlocked and closed off to prevent trespassers from just coming in. But despite these safety measures, within only 6 months of the cave's reopening, a visitor took a wrong turn, and this proved to be a fatal error. So it was November of 2009, and 26-year-old John Edward Jones, he was a second-year medical student that was living in Virginia with his wife, this is Emily, as well as their 1-year-old daughter, Lizzie. They traveled to Utah to spend the holidays with their family. So the couple was actually expecting their second child. They were going to have a baby boy that was born in June of 2010. So this is 7 months after they went and visited the cave. So John was born on January 21st, 1983 in Sandy, Utah, and he hoped to one day when he finished medical school to work as a pediatric cardiologist. So according to his obituary, John was a remarkable person. He really strived to experience every good thing that life had to offer, and he tried to achieve excellence in everything that he did. So if he was going to do it, he was going to do it right and well. He was said to have a wonderful nature, a fantastic sense of humor, and just a real genuine love of people. So John traveled to Utah, like I said, to see his family for Thanksgiving, and he was going to stay at his parents' Stansbury Park home since they were in the area. None of them had actually ever gone to the Nutty Putty Cave. So John's brother Josh decided to organize an excursion. He figured we're all together, we're in the area, we may as well sign ourselves up and book a time to go. So Josh felt that because the Nutty Putty Cave opened into a big room before it then snaked off into more narrow fingers, that it was good for all levels of experience and could be something that the whole family could go and enjoy. So John and Josh were the 2 youngest of 7 children in their family, and they were very well versed and experienced in caving. They actually spent their childhood exploring caves alongside their father. And their father, as well as potentially their brother, I'm not quite clear on that, just happened to run the Utah Cave Rescue Group.
It's definitely big-time cavers.
Right. So this was nothing new for them. So by 2009, though, John was no longer the slender teen that he had once been. He was still in shape. He stood at 6 feet tall and weighed 200 pounds. But, he was in medical school. He was a father, a husband. He hadn't been inside of a cave for many years. The Nutty Putty Cave was also a more challenging cave than maybe he was more well-versed in exploring in his younger days.
Yeah, and you're kind of, muscle memory and all that. You're like, oh, I could do this because
Right.
you used to do it all the time. And it's like, oh, man, I can't get there.
Right. It's like I'm not 19 anymore.
Yeah.
So it was 2 days before Thanksgiving. It was November 24th, 2009, when John, his brother Josh, and 9 other close friends and family members set out for the Nutty Putty Cave, while his wife Emily and his 1-year-old daughter Lizzie, they stayed back home. So the group entered the cave at 8 p.m., and since children were also present, they decided to split off into 2 groups to allow the more experienced cavers to venture off into the more challenging areas of the cave, while the more amateur cavers could do what they were comfortable with and just stay in the more open caverns. So all was well in the first hour of exploring, and more experienced group explored a large chamber that was known as the Big Slide before John, Josh, and 2 friends broke off to look for what was known as the Birth Canal. And this is one of the cave's narrowest spots.
No thanks.
So sadly, John came upon an entrance to what he believed to be the birth canal, and he began to crawl through. So he's crawling deeper and deeper into the earth, and the passage is becoming progressively narrower. And it took all of his might to push himself into a nearly impossibly small space. Since John extensively researched the cave, he fully believed that he was in the correct area, and because he thought he was in this particular area, it was in his belief that it was going to break him through to a larger cavern. And then he thought once that happened, he would have the space to turn himself around and safely come back out the way he had just crawled through.
Yeah.
But tragically, John was unaware that he had mistakenly made a wrong turn, and rather than entering the birth canal, he had actually ventured into a passageway of what is known as Bob's Push. And this is an unnamed crevice, so where he actually was did not have a name, and the reason for that was because it was an uncharted part of the cave that hadn't even been mapped because it was so small and narrow.
Mm-hmm.
So before he realized his grave error, again, he's going forward thinking he's going to enter into a larger cavern.
And the problem is that he's experienced. So it's like, I know, it gets a little small sometimes. I'm going to keep on pushing. And he knows. He's like, I'm going to get to somewhere in his head. He's like, I'm going to get to the opening.
That was what was going to happen.
Oh, God. Like you and me would be like, nope, I'm out of here.
Exactly. Abort. So with this, John likely gave one last push forward, and as he did, he exhaled all of the air from his chest, which gave his body the room to wriggle through an L-shaped spot that measured 10 inches wide and 18 inches high.
Oh man, right now I just can't breathe. That's crazy.
When our son showed me the image of how he ended up getting stuck, I almost had the sensation that I couldn't breathe. And it brought tears to my eyes to think that this actually happened. So where he was basically smaller than the opening of a front-load washing machine. So as John breathed in again, his chest thus expanded, which wedged his body inside of the dark tunnel. And from what I read, his headlamp flew off of his head. So now he's thrust into darkness. And beginning to panic, he realized that he needed to turn around, but because the crevice really engulfed his body, he realized in horror that he was stuck. And as he struggled in panic, his body only slid further down into the narrower 8.5-inch wide area.
God, 8.5 inches. That's like nothing. That's
just terrifying.
It's like you could just feel like for the guy right now, and like he's so freaked out. And the more freaked out you get, the more your heart's beating, and the more you want to breathe. And you're like, I can't breathe, but I have to. Oh my God.
And you also imagine where you are in the earth, that you're like deep inside the earth. So in the meantime, his 23-year-old brother Josh was searching for John, and he eventually came upon him. And initially, within the first seconds that he came upon him, in his head, he thought that this would be yet another family adventure story. Because again, they had done this as a family, and he recalled a time that his father had gotten himself stuck back when they were kids, and eventually he was able to work himself free, and this is what he assumed would happen with his brother.
And I think that's part of the whole spelunking adventure. It's like, all right, well, we'll get you out. It'll be fine.
Right. So as Josh continued to crawl through, the slick clay-like walls that are so narrow, his apprehension steadily grew. As he reached the corkscrew area, Josh also found that he was now stuck. And as he laid eyes on John, panic began to set in when he saw his brother's feet. And the way that he saw it and visualized it was that the earth and the rock had basically swallowed John. So the two devout Mormon brothers began praying together for guidance to work through this absolutely horrific situation.
So they could hear each other, obviously.
Yes.
Okay.
So Josh worked his way free because, of course, at one moment he found that he was stuck.
And it's nice. At least he'll be like, hey, I'm going to get you help. You know,
Right.
we're going to do this. You got this. I got you, bro. Don't worry.
Try to keep him calm.
Yeah.
So he wrapped his feet around John's calves and began pulling. And John's body began to inch up, but because he had nothing to grasp, as soon as Josh would release him, John would slip back down into the narrow crevice. So at this moment, Josh realized that there was absolutely no way he himself was going to be able to free his brother, and he wondered how anyone would. So John was not only stuck in a terrifyingly small, pitch black space, but he was unimaginably stuck upside down in a 70-degree angle. One hand was wedged under his body and the other was forced backwards.
So 70 degrees. So like almost 90. You
Right.
know, like, oh,
like
man.
a little bit of a tilt up from 90. So Josh knew that he needed to quickly get help for his brother.
Well, yeah, blood's rushing to his head and he's
Right.
going to pass out.
So he was fully aware of the grave situation that his brother was in. And as Josh climbed out of the cave's entrance to call 911, he had a friend go back and take over for his brother. And at the time that he's standing out making this call, John was 400 feet inside the cave and 100 feet below the Earth's surface. So Josh, now aware that help was on the way, he crawled himself back into the cave in order to take his friend's place. He wanted to be with his brother until rescuers arrived.
That's nice.
So while they waited for the rescuers, the brothers made small talk in an attempt to distract their minds from the desperate situation that John was in. So they discussed Josh's girlfriend, whether or not Josh should enter medical school like his big brother had. They sang hymns together. They continued to pray. And John prayed that he would be saved for his wife and his kids because we know he has a 1-year-old and we know that his wife is pregnant with their son. So after about an hour, Josh began to hear the voices of the rescuers at the cave's entrance. And despite the fact that he did not want to leave his brother, he went to find them, knowing that his brother's life was in that little crack within the earth. And John reassured Josh that it was okay for him to go, and he said to him, "Go get him, brother." So Susie Matola was the first rescuer to arrive, and it was at 12:30 a.m. Now it's Wednesday, November 25th, one day before Thanksgiving. So it was just after 9 p.m. when her rescue pager sounded. She was in the middle of moving into her new house and getting herself settled.
Wait, so it's been like a whole day he's been in there?
No, it's after midnight. So
Okay.
it's 12:30 a.m. They entered the cave at 8 p.m.
Right, okay.
So, and I think they explored for about an hour or so, and that's why her pager went off at 9 p.m. to let her know. So she was in the midst of getting herself settled into her new home, but without hesitation, she dropped everything and headed down the long, dark dirt road in her Toyota 4Runner to the cave's entrance. And Susie inched her way in through the cramped limestone tunnel through 60-degree heat. It's somewhere around like 50-ish, 55-degree heat all year round. And it's really humid down there because that's how the cave forms, is from the thermal activity from inside the earth. So she was snaking her way through the earth with a rope tied around her ankles so that rescuers could pull her to safety if she got stuck. So 30 minutes after she entered the cave, her headlamp fell upon a pair of navy and black running shoes, and this stuck out of the end of a narrow 135-foot tunnel. And this is her coming upon John. So as she came upon John, she said, "Hi, John, my name is Susie. How's it going?" And John responded, "Hi, Susie. Thank you for coming, but I really, really want to get out." It appeared that his body had been swallowed by the rock, and despite her small stature, Susie was unable to fully extend her extremities. However, Susie was an experienced caver, and she knew the ins and outs of the Nutty Putty Cave. But like I said, I mean, we are talking that they don't have room to work with here.
Yeah.
Everywhere John is exceptionally narrow. It's not like they can move around. She can't like even huddle down on her knees. Like she's in a flat position.
Yeah.
So by the time Susie reached John, he had been trapped for over 3 hours. and she assured the young man that she would get him free lickety-split. So she tied a webbed rope around his ankles, and in dismay, she realized that getting him out of the cave, she likened it to swimming backwards against a really strong current. As she got to realize the situation more and more, she realized how difficult, if not impossible, that this was going to be.
That sucks.
So John's situation was extremely dire because a human body is designed to work in an upright position, and he is head down 70 degrees. So with that being said, we're designed to work upright because the heart works with the force of gravity, not against it. So trauma physician, this is Doug Murdoch, he was notified about the situation and the fact that John was stuck upside down, and he knew that they were in a race against time. So according to Dr. Murdoch, being upside down, your body has to pump the blood out of the brain all the time, something that our body is not designed to do. And because of this, the entire system begins to fail. As Dr. Murdoch made his way to the scene, he was fully aware that blood and fluids would eventually begin to pool in John's brain and his lungs, and his circulation would be slowing. Capillaries would be leaking and toxins would be building up in his blood. And if he wasn't saved soon, the toxins would eventually rush to his heart and kill him. Because there are very few studies about the long-term effects of being upside down, Dr. Murdoch was really only guessing how much time that John had. It was his estimation, maybe 8 to 10 hours. And again, by the time the first rescuer reached him, he had been upside down for 3 hours. So Susie, who was busy trying to save John, had also been stuck in the Nutty Putty Cave at one time, and she recalled the situation. She said initially she started to panic, but she knew, like you said earlier, the more you panic, the worse the situation gets. So she had to calm herself, tell herself to breathe. And eventually, millimeter by millimeter, she was able to free herself. But again, she is a much smaller person.
Right.
Probably, I don't know, maybe 5'3", 120 some odd pounds. John is 200 pounds. So again, she was able to free herself and hope that she could do that for John and help him.
It's like me versus you being stuck in a cave.
Right. So she was racking her brain, trying to think of any way they could get John free, and led a string of rope from John that was back to the rest of the team in an open area at the cave's entrance. So the team was furiously pulling at this rope. They lacked the power, and not only that, but there was friction against them because the rope is now rubbing against the cave's walls, and that was causing a problem. So she tried to help him shift positions. Maybe that could help free him, but she was unable to lift him. At one point, she stretched a water bottle down to John's right arm, and this is the arm that was forced backwards behind his body, and she hoped that maybe he could tip the water bottle forward. And he did, and she watched as the water poured down his arm and hoped that maybe some would reach his mouth. So she also cut off his jeans, hoping maybe that would free up a little bit of space.
Yeah.
And, in the meantime, while she's doing all of this, she's trying to keep him calm. So they're just chatting, and they both know the grave seriousness of the situation, but she's trying to take his mind off of things. So she's joking with him that, gosh, you are going to have a story to tell your wife and kids for the rest of your life. And when you're free, we should go have pancakes. Mm-hmm. So during their time together, they discussed religion and the fact that Susie was also LDS, but she had fallen away from the church teaching in recent years. And as precious time just continued to tick by, Susie noticed that slowly but surely John's voice was growing more nasally, while his breathing was growing more labored, and his lungs, this is a sign that his lungs were starting to fill with fluid.
Yeah.
So trapped in the complete darkness of the cave, John had absolutely no sense of time. And according to rescuers, after he had been trapped for over 8 hours, he thought in his mind that he had been there for 2 days. So fresh out of ideas, Susie eventually climbed out of the cave. She had been with John in there for 2 hours, trying anything she could. And she allowed another rescuer to take her place, thinking maybe somebody else would have a different idea. So the team on the outside of the cave was in the process of rigging a pulley system that was anchored to the tunnel's walls with a series of climbing cams to help solve the friction issue. So it would rig it up along the way, so it wasn't so much pressure and friction on the rope. So the cams were pushed through a thick layer of powdery calcite that coated the cave's walls, and then rope was strung through the attached pulley. So the process was exceptionally slow, and we know we're in a race against time because he's stuck upside down. It would have been different had he been stuck upright. They would have had so much more time.
Right. It's like just a matter of time. Like, we'll get you out. Just,
Right.
we'll make sure you're fed and watered and you'll be out eventually. But it's like, you are going to die if we don't do something.
Right.
Quick.
So it's very, very slow, this process, and each trip into the tunnel to pass another piece of gear took nearly an hour.
Real quick question. They probably didn't do this, I would imagine, to keep him like, just without stressing out too much. But did they tell him that it was a matter of time?
No.
I mean, he probably knew that if you're upside down, like things are getting bad.
He was in medical school too.
Okay.
So, I'm sure he knew, but absolutely not. They were not going to tell him anything like that.
Right.
So as the hours passed, more rescuers from all over Utah continued to arrive as the Utah County Sheriff's Office set up a command center as the rescuers gathered through, ideas, because you have a lot of cavers here and they're just going over what they could do to get him out of this situation. So they tried ordering 6 gallons of vegetable oil to help maybe slide him out. They considered explosives, but they determined that neither of those methods would work. They tried to widen the rocky corkscrew to get him out, but after an hour and a half, they had only drilled through 6 inches of rock.
Oh my God.
So it's because of the tightness of the area, they couldn't use, jackhammers and things like that. They couldn't fit in there.
Yeah, and like it could potentially like crumble all around them.
It could. Because the area was so tight, like I said, jackhammers could not be utilized. So in the meantime, John's wife, Emily, she is back at John's parents' house, sitting by the phone, just hoping and praying that it was going to ring and she was going to be told that her husband had gotten free. So John and Emily, they had fallen in love when they were students at Brigham Young University. This was when John was 20. And as they stood on the top of Joseph Smith Memorial Building in downtown Salt Lake City, he sprinkled rose petals all over the ground. He knelt down and sang her a song that he had written while strumming his guitar, and he proposed to Emily. And then the two went on to get married in 2006, and John decided to attend medical school. He chose the University of Virginia so that Emily could be closer to where her family lived. So now the sun is rising on November 25th, and Emily could not stand to sit there by the phone any longer.
Yeah.
So she decided to load their daughter Lizzie into the car and headed out to the cave with John's parents. And as they arrived, they were met with over 100 people who were frantically trying to come up with any plan to successfully free her husband. So they had a whole team there. There was ambulances, fire trucks, a life flight helicopter, police SUVs. They were all on standby and ready to go. So Emily could only imagine just how scared her husband must be, and she pictured being there for him, waiting at the entrance of the cave when John was freed. And she just couldn't wait for that moment so that she could give him a hug. So the rescue team utilized the pulley system, but they found that John's feet were hitting the tunnel's low ceiling. Mm-hmm. So as he was getting pulled up, his feet were basically blocking him from going further. So the problem is that his heart was struggling to continue to beat. And with that, his legs were not getting the circulation that they should be getting. Because again, we're working against gravity here.
Yep.
Because the heart cannot force the blood upwards like that to his legs. So with any kind of movement with the rope, he was screaming out in agony.
Oh.
And the simple geometry just seemed impossible.
Right. That's what I was going to say. That not to mention gravity, but also like math.
Right.
Like it's just like the angle he's at. When you're trying to pull it this way, he's going to hit the top. And if you try to pull him this way, it's going to scrape against the side. So it's like, how do you get him out? It's like impossible.
Right. It was just a terrible situation. So the rescue team realized that because of the angle of the tunnel, they would be unable to bend John's body backwards without breaking his legs.
Like you're trying to figure out like a vacuum of some sort, but it's like you just don't have the time, like
No.
or whatever. Like it's impossible.
So, because of his already weakened state, if they did break his legs, this could potentially cause his body to go into shock, which would kill him. Because you could think, oh, who cares? Break his legs.
Right.
He can get his legs, fixed.
I'd be fine with breaking my legs if I'm going to get out, I mean, whatever it is. You just want to see your family and kids and everything.
But the doctor was saying, because he was already so stressed and weakened, this could cause him to die.
Yeah.
So the cams that anchored the pulley system were also unsteady because of the weak calcite, or maybe in one caver's opinion, they didn't have the proper tools to drill them in properly. But by this point, John had been trapped upside down for 12 hours. And what did I say? Dr. Murdoch estimated 8 to 10.
Yeah.
So he's already beyond that point. So the team constructed a new system that was drilled into the rock that would hopefully slowly inch John up and out of the cave to safety. By this time, though, John was beginning to lose touch with reality, and he spoke to one rescuer. This is Ryan Schertz, and he said to Ryan, "Help me get out. I don't want to be on my head." And Ryan was just trying to talk to him and assess the situation. So he said, "Well, why are you on your head?" And John responded, "Why did you guys put me here?" So he was starting to get confused. And again, you have to think about all the blood that is going to his brain.
Yeah.
So as Ryan reached John, he loosened the knots that earlier rescuers had tied to his legs, and he stretched a tube down to him that was attached to a pouch of Gatorade so that John could have something to drink. He tried to offer John comfort as he rubbed his leg and told him he was not alone.
That's nice.
And they discussed the LDS church, and they spoke to each other in Spanish since John had served a Spanish-speaking mission in Ecuador and Ryan had served his mission in Texas. So they were obviously trying to bond, and Ryan was there to calm him. And John told Ryan that he was sorry that he was so fat. He said, "If I wasn't, it would be much easier." So, you can see he's still maintaining his sense of humor at this point. He said, "If only I was a little bit smaller, you'd be able to get him out." And Ryan joked that, "Okay, well, we'll get you out and then we can be workout buddies together and we'll get you back into the shape you were in before."
Yeah.
And Ryan said that John would fluctuate from moments of calm to moments of sheer panic. So one moment they would be calmly laughing and joking, and in the next second, John would begin to furiously thrash his legs. So Ryan spoke with John about his wife and his daughter to help keep him calm. And he learned then that their second child was going to be born. His due date was on Ryan's birthday, which was June 13th. Rescue crews, brought in a telecom. So this is a set of two-way radios that were transmitted by way of cable line that was strung 400 feet from the entrance of the tunnel down to John's location. So Ryan held this out to John so that he could speak with Emily and she could offer him words of encouragement, to maybe help give him some more hope.
Yeah.
So she shouted through, "I love you, just keep fighting." And John cried as he responded, "I love you, I love you. Tell Lizzie I love her. I'll get out and I'll come see you." So by the time the pulley system was finally finished, it was 4 p.m. now on November 25th, and John had been trapped for over 19 hours. So, this is really, they're pushing it on time here. So they're hoping that this would be the thing to do it. The rope fed its way through nearly 15 tandem pulleys that were drilled into the walls of the cave, and Ryan guided John through what he was going to expect. And he said, "Okay, John, I need your help. I need you to make sure you are pushing with your hands, and I'm going to push you this way." So with each tug, John's body moved just a little more and a little more out of the crevice until his feet hit the low ceiling and he screamed. So Ryan instructed the teams to lower him so that he could have a moment to rest. And on the third time of pulling, Ryan was able to stick his head into the crack, and actually he was able to see John's face. And this is the first time John had seen another human's face in nearly 24 hours. So Ryan told John to look at him as he asked him how he was doing, and John replied, "It sucks. I'm upside down. I can't believe I'm upside down."
Not good.
So he actually managed a smile, and that's just the kind of guy, according to his family, that he was. He admitted that his legs were absolutely killing him. So after a 20-minute rest, the team began to pull again, and Ryan was actually hopeful at this moment as John began to inch back up. And as Ryan pictured the moment that John got out of the cave and was able to hug his wife and daughter, Right then, he feels this screaming pain and he blacks out. Ryan.
Oh, no.
So the next thing he knows, he comes to and he sees blood everywhere.
What the hell?
He said his jaw felt broken and he could feel his eye swelling shut.
What?
And this is when he realized that the stone arch had shattered under the pressure of John's body as the rescue team was pulling him up. So with this, a heavy metal carabiner broke free from the earth and shot right at Ryan's face.
Oh my God.
So tragically, not only was he injured, but when the stone broke, John's body slid right back down into the spot where he had started.
Oh, no.
And again, right before the carabiner snapped and it came free from the earth, Ryan actually thought, this is working. John is going to get out of here alive. And then every hope was dashed again. Oh my God. So, of course, we know that now Ryan is, terribly injured. He sees this horrible situation of the fact that John is now back into this hole right where he began. And he is trying to speak to John despite the fact that his tongue had nearly been severed in half. And he is telling John, please just stay calm. I'm going to leave here, but another rescuer is going to come down and take my place.
Jeez.
So Ryan's father, this is Dave Schertz, he headed out of the cave or into the cave. So he took over for his son. And as he reached John, he heard John say, I'm going to die right here. I'm not going to come out of here, am I? And Dave told John that they would get him out as John continued to ask about Ryan's well-being because he knew he got injured when the carabiner broke. So Dave noticed that John began to grow quiet. His breathing was starting to slow. He attempted to wrap a rope around John's waist, and as he lowered himself into the wider part of the crack, the space was so tight that he couldn't even get the rope around John's body. So when he asked John to suck in his stomach, John didn't respond, and Dave realized that he was stuck himself.
Oh my God.
So after 15 minutes, he's now inching himself free. So Dave furiously tried to drill in order to get the pulley system back into a hole that was too small. He is, he knows we're coming to an end here.
Yeah.
He's wiping the sweat from his face, doing everything that he can to get this figured out. And as Dave made his way out of the cave, he pulled someone aside from the Utah County Sheriff's Department to let them know that John still did have a heartbeat, but he was actively dying. So another rescuer, this is Brandon Koalis. He was a member of the Utah Cave Rescue. He crawled into the cave to take Dave's spot, and he brought the telecom back into the cave so that Emily could speak with her husband. And she, of course, is standing on the outside of the cave with John's family, and they had just finished praying all together. So she's telling John into the telecom to just take a rest, take a minute, and then try pushing again. And by this point, I think she had renewed hope because, they were starting to get him out. They had just prayed. And at this moment in time, she thought that there was somehow, some way her husband was going to be okay.
Yeah, she didn't see what was actually going on.
No. So before Brandon went down to sit with John, he was informed of, his rapidly declining condition. And John had been talking about seeing angels and demons around him. By the time Brandon reached John, John was no longer conscious, and he knew that without John's help, they would be unable to contort his legs into the overhang to get him out.
Yeah, just physics. They needed some help from down below.
So Brandon could hear John's breath, which by this time was very deep and gurgly, as if his lungs were completely filled with fluid. His feet began to move and then frantically kick, and then once again he was suddenly still. Brandon then heard what was likely John's final gasp of breath. Ugh. Unsure if John was still alive, though, he and other rescuers continued to work for several more hours to try to widen the opening. So at this point, he's trying to widen the opening because even if John did take his last breath, he wants his family to be able to have his body recovered. So even if he did pass away, he's still trying to get him out of here. So after 2 hours of just furious digging and drilling or whatever they were doing, they had advanced only 2 inches. And tragically, at 11:56 p.m. on November 25th, 2009, this is just minutes before Thanksgiving, a paramedic crawled down into the cave and pronounced John dead after he had been lodged head down into this crevice for more than 27 hours. Just tragic.
So sad.
So rescuers inside the cave were now tasked with the horrific job of going out and talking to John's family as well as his wife that has a 1-year-old daughter and is pregnant with her son.
And they all can't wait for the news. They're like, yeah, we got him out finally. And they're going to see him. And then they're going to see their faces and be like, oh, no, this is bad news.
The rescuers were just devastated. So you can only imagine how John's family must have felt. So when Emily was given the devastating news of her husband's death, she was baffled and she couldn't understand how they could be sure that he was even dead since they hadn't actually found a pulse in his leg in hours because, again, of the gravity. So they were just, beside themselves. And she was really worried at this point that he wasn't actually dead and they were all going to leave and he was going to be in there alive and trapped. And Brandon told her that he had heard John dying. And obviously this is a hard thing to say, but he is also giving her the reassurance that you won't be leaving him alive.
Yeah.
I heard him actively dying. So Emily forced herself to climb into John's parents' car and drive away, leaving her husband behind. So it's later in the day, it's Thanksgiving morning, November 26th, and John's family was faced with a second devastating blow when they were told that John's body would not be able to be removed from the cave. They were horrified as they were informed that removing John's body after death would have been that much more difficult than when he was alive. As, like I said before, he is no longer to assist the rescuers by pushing himself up, twisting himself through this rocky corkscrew of earth. So despite their immense grief, they understood and they agreed because they were unwilling to put anyone else in danger and risk someone else's life. And they had to sit there on Thanksgiving and not only accept the fact that John was gone, but that the Nutty Putty Cave would be his final resting place.
So sad.
So sad. And they were told that the cave would officially be sealed off to prevent any future injury or death. So thus, John's body is sealed in this tomb, basically.
Yeah.
So on December 9th, 2009, the entrance of the cave was sealed off with concrete, like a concrete plug. The Jones family mounted a plaque at the cave's entrance to memorialize John, while a second plaque was hung in honor of the search and rescue team because these people are absolutely incredible. And I was watching a documentary on this case and just tears were just streaming down my face because not only did these people put their lives at risk to save another human being, but when they realized that there was no rescuing John, they were absolutely gutted.
Well, yeah, that's like their livelihoods. They want to help and they're experts in this and they're selfless and they're heroes to try to help out, and to know that all their efforts were for nothing. They're like, oh my gosh, it crushes them. And then, all this talking, they all connected with him. Like
100%.
every single one that was in the cave, like they all had some kind of a connection, and now he's gone.
Yeah. So it was really tough. And again, I will say these are amazing human beings.
Absolutely.
So Emily realized that she would have no gravesite to bring her children to, but at the same time, she knew how much her husband loved the outdoors, the beauty of Utah, where he was born and raised, the wide open spaces. So, it comforted her to know that this was actually a fitting place to be his resting place.
Yeah, that's the only way you can look at it.
Of course. So Ryan, who was badly injured in the cave, comforted Emily during John's funeral, assuring her that John would always be with her. After his injury, Ryan's lip had swollen to the point that it drooped over his chin, and he was only able to drink an Ensure shake through a straw because his tongue was just riddled with stitches. Ryan expressed that despite the passage of time, it remains painful to speak about John and what happened, and he believes that had John survived, they would 100% have been friends.
Oh, yeah.
So Susie, the rescuer that first reached John, she also struggles with John's death as she continues to go over strategy after strategy. What could we have done differently? Did we do everything we could to save him?
And thinking of some ideas and not being able to do them.
Right. So she cannot stop thinking of the young man who, excuse me, who died alone, terrified in a dark hole. So of the 137 rescuers that had been at the scene, only 6 had actually gone down and reached John in the cave. And the fact that John's body could not be retrieved also haunted Susie, as well as the fact that they had been so close, so close, but unable to rescue him.
Yeah.
So since Susie had not been there when John's family told the rescue team, we know you guys did everything you could. We do not blame you for what happened. So Josh, John's brother, reached out to Susie. He called her. He asked her many questions. The two poured over, everything. They poured their hearts out to each other about the blame that each person felt. Susie blamed herself for being unable to save John, while Josh blamed himself for being the person who planned the trip to the Nutty Putty Cave and, voiced his desire to go into this tight passage. And Josh could never forget how he found his brother and the appearance that John's body had just been swallowed by the rock. It's just something that just haunts him and he can't unsee it.
Yeah.
So Susie and Josh ended up wading through their grief together, and they actually built a friendship that revolved around their love of the outdoors because they both love the outdoors. So when Josh plans a group outing, a camping trip or biking or kayaking, something like that, he always calls and gives Susie an invite. So this is something that bonded a friendship.
Yeah.
So some of the rescuers who desperately tried to save John but were unable to do so were so scarred by what happened that they never entered another cave again.
Wow.
Meanwhile, Emily holds the peace she found after she said the final prayer with John's family, which never left her. And she believes that John is still watching out for them and their family remains a family. After John's death, Emily headed back to Salem, Virginia so that she could be close with her family, and then she delivered their baby boy, which she named John, on June 15th, 2010. After John's death, Josh decided that he wanted to be more like his big brother, and he decided to dedicate his life to the church and also go to medical school. So he started in pre-med, and, however, often he admits after the fact that he kind of just put his head down and didn't acknowledge the grief that he was going through. Mm-hmm. So he found that he's in medical school trying to strive to be like his big brother, and he'd be sitting there and he would be flooded with guilt, shame, and depression. He experienced night terrors as well as other side effects of PTSD. At times when he was just simply driving out alone, he would just sit in his car and say over and over to himself, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, basically apologizing to his brother, taking full blame for his brother's death because he had been the one to plan the outing to go to the Nutty Putty Cave.
That sucks.
So Josh made the decision to leave the church since he couldn't shake the guilt and shame over his brother's death. After he was diagnosed with PTSD, he moved to San Diego. He started seeing a psychiatrist. So sometime around his 5th visit with the psychiatrist, he realized that he never actually cried over his brother's death in the year since. So he allowed himself to sob, and he's sitting there and he basically declared that he was now healed. Like, obviously he wanted to just be better.
Yeah.
So at the time, Josh didn't acknowledge the depth of his depression and grief, and over a decade later, he was actually diagnosed with what's known as POTS, which is post-jural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, and this is any disorder of the autonomic nervous system, and it causes an abnormal rise in heart rate upon standing that causes dizziness and fatigue. And according to the National Institute of Health, it is often found in those with super high levels of anxiety. So all of this grief and anxiety and, PTSD he held inside likely contributed to this.
Yeah, and this isn't the type of thing you just get over.
No.
You got to learn to live with it, unfortunately.
Right, and cope and grieve and heal.
Yeah.
So during an annual Jones Brothers retreat in 2022, Josh and his brother Mike was also at the Nutty Putty Cave that horrific day. They hiked to a plateau in Arizona, and Mike led Josh through a breathwork session. And during the session, Josh said that he felt like he was split wide open, and he and his brother sobbed together. And as tears poured down his face, he felt close to John in that moment. And the shame that he had forced down for so many years came to the surface and was replaced by the love that he had for his brother. So in 2016, the movie called The Last Descent was released. It's based on John's rescue attempt. And in 2017, PBS produced a documentary that focused on search and rescue teams. It did feature John's case, and this was titled Search and Rescue. In 2019, a TV series called Fascinating Horror ran an episode that was titled The Nutty Putty Caves. The Jones family feel that interest in John's story helps keep his memory alive. So Emily went on to remarry 3 years after John's death. She changed her name and gave birth to 2 more children. She feels that her husband, this is Donovan Sanchez, has truly helped her pick up the pieces of her life, and he has helped guide her through the grief of losing John. And sadly, she has received a great deal of backlash and hate because she moved forward and went on to remarry, which is absurd. So during an interview on the 15th anniversary of John's death, this was in November of 2024, just this past November, Emily indicated that she is finally shedding the layer of grief that she has been carrying. And she sees her son John and her daughter Lizzie in their father. You know, she looks at them and she could see him coming through them. And at least once a year, they do head back to Utah to visit John's parents. And she visits the cave less and less often than she used to. And she acknowledges that life can be both tragic and beautiful at the same time. And that is the sad death of John Edward Jones inside the Nutty Putty Cave.
So many horrible aspects of that, man. And of course, like, if you want to see the worst of people, you go online and like people giving their opinions about like somebody else remarrying and like, yeah, whatever, like just leave her alone. I don't know.
Like, why would you want her to not go on and live her life?
Because you go online and people complain about everything. There's like anything that happens ever, there's always somebody complaining about it and somebody that loves it, like everywhere. It sucks. Like no matter what you do, like Mr. Beast, he recently like gave a bunch of people that, you know, didn't have limbs, like prosthetic limbs. And people are like, oh, why'd you have to put it on a video? It's like, oh my gosh, man, just like let the guy do, like, cause then he makes more money so he can do other things. I'm sure he makes some money and buys some cool stuff. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. Who
But at
cares?
the same time, people are being helped.
Right. So it's like you can find the negative in things or you can find the positive in things. Or like maybe, you know, just who cares what Emily does? Let her do her life as long as she's not hurting anybody, whatever you want to do. I mean, I don't know her personally, obviously, but like this whole family went through all this stuff, man. I couldn't imagine any of it.
Yeah, it's just a terribly sad case, and my heart goes out to the Jones family for their loss of John, who sounded like a really incredibly remarkable person that probably would have gone out and been a pediatric cardiologist just like he intended to do, because that's the kind of guy, from what I learned from him in my research, is that when he set his mind to something, he was going to do it.
Yeah.
And he had his daughter and a son on the way, and it's just tragic.
And it's good to hear that the Jones family likes to hear that the story's being told, to remember John and everything. Because like in the middle, I'm like, man, I wonder if they hate when stories like when podcasts like us pick this up and stuff. And,
right.
you know, it'll be on TikTok and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, if you know, definitely worth talking about his memory. He was here on Earth and he sounded like a good guy, like you said.
Right. So just terribly, terribly sad, but you know, just, you know, want to keep his memory alive like his family said.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate it. And if you love what we do, then you can go ahead and head on over to Patreon or Apple subscriptions and subscribe and go ahead and get yourself over 100 bonus episodes. So like if you like this, you'll have even more online. Or if you're an Apple subscriber, you can have 3 free days just to binge all you want.
Yeah,
so.
Just binge away. And I'm sorry if my throat was a little off. I'm desperately fighting something that's trying to take over my system, and my body's like, you know, you're not going to get your way in here.
That's right.
And so I'm hoping that my white blood cells fight off whatever thing is trying to brew in here and just keeps it at bay.
All right, stop talking about it. It's disgusting.
It's disgusting. All right, guys, on that note, we will be back on Wednesday. If you're a bonus listener, you can get a bonus episode, but otherwise we will be back next Sunday. And until next time, bye.